We are now going to begin Chapter 5, the chapter that deals with quadrilaterals. The first section explores the properties of parallelograms. We've worked with parallel lines, and we've worked with triangle congruence. Now we're going to put the two concepts together to talk about parallelograms. The definition of a parallelogram is a quadrilateral that has both pairs of opposite sides being parallel. Our first theorem deals with opposite sides of a parallelogram being congruent. Use what you know about parallel lines and triangles to prove the theorem. If I take the parallelogram and I draw a diagonal, I have now created two triangles. If I can prove them congruent, then I can prove through CP/CTC that the opposite sides of the parallelogram are congruent. Well, knowing that I have parallel lines automatically will give me alternate interior angles that are congruent. And that's because AD and BC are parallel to each other. And here's my transversal. Likewise, the green angles are also congruent because AB and DC are parallel and create those alternate interior angles. Please pause the video and write down what theorem of congruence would make those two triangles congruent to each other. The next theorem that we need to prove is that opposite angles of a parallelogram are congruent. I'm going to ask you to use what you saw from the last slide, draw a diagonal, and prove the two triangles are congruent to each other in order to be able to prove that the corresponding angles that are opposite are also congruent. You'll need to do this in two separate proofs. The last theorem that we have to prove is the fact that diagonals of a parallelogram bisect each other. So what I'm asking you to prove here is that segment AM is congruent to MC, and line segment DM is congruent to MB. Jot down the steps that you would use in order to be able to prove that the diagonals bisect each other. You are now allowed to use both the definition of parallelogram and the first theorem about the opposite sides of a parallelogram are congruent, in addition to all the information that you know about congruent triangles and parallel lines. Please make sure that you're writing down a plan for a proof.